But of course, the unbelievable turn of events in today's news happened in federal court in Washington, D.C., in the courtroom of Judge Emmett Sullivan. And this just did not go as anybody expected it to. So this is the former National Security Advisor of the United States appearing in court for sentencing after he pled guilty more than a year ago and entered into a cooperation deal with the special counsel's office. This whole sentencing today was supposed to just roll downhill. There wasn't even a difference of opinion between the prosecution and the defense as to what should happen to Mike Flynn today. Both sides said he should get 0 jail time. But amazingly, that consensus view of the defense and the prosecution is not what happened today. Again, we will get expert advice on this in just a morning, but this just turned into a train wreck for Mike Flynn and more broadly for supporters of the president, particularly in conservative media and on Capitol Hill, who had tried to turn elements of the Mueller investigation into some sort of indictment of the FBI, into some sort of scandal about the FBI and law enforcement. That took a major hit today. I mean, this was just we knew there was a little element of unpredictability here, but this went way, way off the rails, even before we got to the part where everybody in the courtroom kept saying the word treason over and over again. But this is how it started. Judge, good morning. Courtroom clerk, good morning, Your Honor. The judge, good morning. Sorry, Your Honor, this is criminal case 17-232, United States of America versus Michael Flynn. Will all parties please come forward to this lectern and identify yourselves for the record? Mr. Van Grack, good morning, Your Honor. Brandon Van Grack on behalf of the United States. He's a veteran counter-espionage prosecutor. With me at counsel's table is Zainab Ahmed, who is a veteran counterterrorism prosecutor, and William McCausland for the FBI. Judge says, good morning, counsel. Ms. Ahmad says, good morning, Your Honor. And then Mr. Kellner, good morning, Your Honor. Robert Kellner with Covington and Burling for the defendant, Michael Flynn. With me at counsel table is Stephen Anthony. The judge says, all right, good morning. Good morning, counsel. And then the judge says, Mr. Flynn, good morning. How are you? And then the defendant, Michael Flynn, says, good. The judge, all right, good morning. This case is in a very unique posture. Judge Sullivan says, quote, I read every filing very carefully in this case. There is a great deal of non-public information in this case, and I'll just leave it at that. If any of my questions require a party to disclose non-public information, or if I begin to discuss something non-public, don't be shy in telling me. My clerks over the years have learned to do this, and then because we've just got a transcript, we just know he makes some sort of gesture. If I get off of script or if I get into areas where I won't get offended if you do it. I may not see you, so stand up and raise your hands or say something, please. I don't want to unintentionally say something that should not be revealed on the public docket. So this is right at the outset of today's hearing. And this is a really good reminder right at the outset that all of those redactions we have seen in the court filings in Mike Flynn's case, all those big black bars, those things are redacted to us, the public, but they are not redacted to the judge. He has seen the non-public information. He has seen the unredacted explanation of the kinds of cooperation that Flynn has offered to the special counsel, the cases that he has helped with. The judge has also seen the FBI's unredacted notes about their interactions with Flynn and about him lying to the FBI. And we really do not know, as members of the public, what's behind those black redacting bars. But who knows? Maybe what's behind those black bars is what contributed to this judge going off like a volcano today about the seriousness and the terribleness of Mike Flynn's behavior. I'm going to cut to the chase here because this is the part that you have heard about today, if you have heard about any of this. The judge speaking to Michael Flynn, the defendant at this point. The judge, quote, I'm going to be very frank with you. This crime is very serious. It involves false statements to the Federal Bureau of Investigation agents on the premises of the White House. In the White House, in the West Wing, by a high-ranking security officer with, up to that point, an unblemished career of service to his country. That is a very serious offense. You know, I'm going to take into consideration the 33 years of military service and sacrifice, and I'm going to take into consideration the substantial assistance of several ongoing investigations. But I'm also going to take into consideration the aggravating circumstances. And the aggravating circumstances are serious. Not only did you lie to the FBI, but you lied to senior officials in the Trump transition team and administration. Those lies caused the then vice president-elect, the incoming chief of staff, and the then press secretary to lie to the American people. Moreover, you lied to the FBI about 3 different topics, and you made those false statements while you were serving as the national security advisor, the President of the United States' most serious national security aide. I cannot minimize that. 2 months later, you again made false statements in multiple documents filed pursuant to the Foreign Agents Registration Act. So all along, you were an unregistered agent of a foreign country while serving as the national security advisor to the President of the United States. I mean, arguably, that undermines everything this flag over here stands for. At which point he swivels in his chair and points at the American flag in the corner of his courtroom. The judge continues. Arguably, you sold your country out. The court is going to consider all of that. I cannot assure you that if you proceed today, you will not receive a sentence of incarceration. I cannot make any guarantees, but I am not hiding my disgust, my disdain for this criminal offense. The defendant, Michael Flynn, yes, Your Honor. The judge, but it's your call, Mr. Flynn. I'm just being upfront with you, as I would with anyone else, and everyone who knows me knows that. If you want to proceed to sentencing today, I cannot promise anything other than I'll give full consideration to anything you wish to say, if you want to say anything at all. Do you understand that? The defendant, Michael Flynn, yes, sir. The judge, but if you want some more time and to come back later after it's clear that you've done everything you possibly can for the United States of America, I'm going to grant that request. Now, if you would like to take a recess now and talk to your attorneys, I'm happy to accommodate you in that regard as well. Would you like to do that? The defendant, Michael Flynn, yes, Your Honor. So at that point in the proceedings today, everybody knows all bets are off, right? Heading into today's sentencing, Mike Flynn's defense lawyers and the prosecutors from the special counsel's office, they had both argued that Flynn should receive 0 jail time. But of course, everybody knows that it's not a consensus thing. It is ultimately up to the judge. And here's the judge, surprise, in open court, flat out warning Flynn, I cannot assure you that if you proceed today, you will not receive a sentence of incarceration. There are 6 different instances in today's sentencing hearing where the judge says to Flynn and his lawyers, are you sure you really want me to sentence you today? Are you sure? You don't want to rethink that? Today? Really? On the basis of what I've got in front of me, you want me to sentence you today? Are you sure? 6 times. The judge even tells Flynn at one point, hey, look, I've set up a private room for you to talk to your lawyers today about whether you really, really, truly want me to sentence you today. And Flynn and his lawyers, 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, keep saying over and over again, nope, judge, we're good, we're fine, let's go ahead. Until after the part where the judge says to Flynn, that he's disgusted with and has disdain for Flynn's offense, and he tells Flynn how he sold out his country and how he has undermined this flag over here, and he turns and points. And at that point, yeah, Flynn decides, okay, actually, sir, I know I said no 5 times, but I'm going to take you up on that offer to maybe not go ahead with you sentencing me today. So Michael Flynn, in the end, doesn't get sentenced today. Flynn's lawyer finally says, quote, we would like to request a continuance of sentencing, Your Honor. And so Flynn's cooperation with the government will continue, and his case, the sentencing in his case, will be continued for another few months. He'll be back presumably sometime in March to go before this judge again and talk it over again, maybe under circumstances that wouldn't make the judge explode in front of an open courtroom about how he feels about Mike Flynn's behavior. Now, the legal rationale from the judge today for not sentencing Mike Flynn today, it's the legal rationale basically from the judge, which he persuaded Flynn and his lawyers to go along with. That was the idea that maybe there is a little more that Flynn could do to help out the prosecution here. Remember, Mueller's office, the special counsel's office, recommended no jail time for Flynn, not because they didn't say he committed serious offenses. They asserted to the court that, in fact, Mike Flynn committed serious crimes. But they said that is outweighed by what a great cooperator he has been, helping them with all these other cases. And the judge today was like, however good he's been as a cooperator, you're going to need to add some more cooperation to that side of the scale to balance out his crimes, because his crimes, to my mind, are unbelievably bad. So he's definitely shocking Mike Flynn and his defense lawyers today. He also seems to sort of be shocking the prosecutors. And here's where we got some of the news that was made today, made in open court. So this is the judge asking the prosecutors about whether they're absolutely sure that there's no more cooperation they might be able to squeeze out of Mike Flynn. The judge says, now I'd like to hear from the government first, which means the prosecution. Would you come forward, counsel, to the microphone? The judge says, and again, I'm not intentionally trying to intrude on matters that should not be on the public record, so I will respect your resistance to answer a question, all right? But is Mr. Flynn still cooperating with and providing assistance to the government? Prosecutor Brandon Van Grack, Your Honor, it remains a possibility that General Flynn is continuing to cooperate with the government at this time. The judge says, all right, it's a possibility? Mr. Van Grack, yes, Your Honor. The judge, more often than not, the court will wait until the government says this person is finished, this person has testified in the grand jury, or there have been pleas of guilty entered, there's nothing else he can do to help us. But in this case, there's still a likelihood that he could help, correct? The prosecutor then says, yes, but, quote, the defendant has provided the vast majority of cooperation that could be considered. So this is the judge being like, tell me he's not at the end of cooperating. Tell me he's got something else that he can tell you. He's got something else that he can give you, because that's the cooperation that he's given you thus far is what I'm supposed to balance against what I can see about his bad behavior. If he's not done, you might want to wait to have him sentenced until after he's totally done, because he's going to need every iota of his cooperation to balance out how I view his crimes. And at this point, we get some news, because the prosecutors from Mueller's office, they bring up to the judge, unprompted, the case that we learned about yesterday, and we had wondered if this was going to come up in Flynn's sentencing today. This is the case, just unsealed yesterday, where Flynn's longtime business partner was charged with multiple felonies. This is somebody who was also a Trump transition official. He was the vice chairman of Flynn's intelligence group, and he was charged yesterday with being part of a scheme, along with Mike Flynn, person A in that indictment. He's charged with being part of a scheme, basically, to operate secretly in this country as paid foreign agents of the government of Turkey, without ever disclosing it. So the prosecutors from Mueller's office bring that up to the judge today, as if that should help Flynn even more. Look, he helped us get that indictment too. He's been super helpful. He's a great cooperator. But the judge immediately boomerangs that back at them by saying, basically, yeah, I see how he helped you get that indictment filed, but Flynn participated in the crime that is laid out in that indictment too. I mean, the judge says, looking at the evidence of what Flynn himself did in that alleged crime, you could have charged him for that. You could have locked him up for that too, right? I mean, here's how it goes. Prosecutor Brandon Van Grack. Quote, we'd like to bring to the court's attention that we just had an indictment unsealed in the Eastern District of Virginia, charging Bijan Kian and Akeem Alptekin with various violations. And the defendant provided substantial assistance to the attorneys in the Eastern District of Virginia in obtaining that charging document. The judge, all right, could the defendant have been indicted in that indictment? Could he have been charged in that indictment? Prosecutor Brandon Van Grack, and Your Honor, the answer is yes. The judge says, your answer is he could have been charged in that indictment, Mr. Van Grack. Yes, Your Honor. They then talk about how many years in prison Mike Flynn could have received just for that crime if he had been charged and convicted in that case that was unsealed yesterday in Virginia. The judge concludes that discussion by saying, quote, the exposure for Flynn would have been grave then. Exposure to Mr. Flynn would have been significant had he been indicted, meaning he could have potentially received many years in prison. Mr. Van Grack, the prosecutor, says, yes, Your Honor. So that is a remarkable moment. That's the prosecutors trying to help Flynn out here. I mean, they're prosecuting Flynn, but they're trying to help him out. They're telling the judge, hey, he helped us out in this other case. And the judge, in response, makes the prosecutors spell out how guilty Flynn might have been in that felony criminal case, too. So things are not going well for Michael Flynn here. You should also know that the effort by Flynn and his lawyers over recent days to argue, heading into today's sentencing, that Flynn was kind of the victim here, that he didn't really mean to lie to the FBI somehow tricked him or unfairly boxed him in to lying inadvertently. They tried that a little bit in the document that they submitted to the judge about Flynn's sentencing in advance of today's hearing. That argument really did not go well today. And that's important even beyond just the fate of Mike Flynn, because this has become a real cause celeb, particularly in conservative media. It was even trumpeted today from the White House by White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders, who repeated those claims essentially about Flynn, in her words, being ambushed by the FBI, as if Flynn didn't really lie, or if he did, it wasn't his fault. It should be noted that the judge in Flynn's case just destroyed that argument today. He forced Flynn and Flynn's lawyers to disavow any claim to that argument, and ultimately Flynn's lawyer even apologized to the judge for raising it at all. The judge, quote, "Do you believe the FBI had a legal obligation to warn Mr. Flynn that lying to the FBI was a federal crime?" Mr. Kellner, the defense lawyer, "No, Your Honor." The judge, "Is it your contention that Mr. Flynn was entrapped by the FBI?" Kellner, the defense lawyer, "No, Your Honor." The judge, "Do you believe Mr. Flynn's rights were violated by the fact that he didn't have a lawyer present for the interview?" "No, Your Honor." "Do you believe his rights were violated by the fact that he may have been dissuaded from having a lawyer present for the interview?" "No, Your Honor." The judge says the sentencing memorandum also states that Mr. Flynn pled guilty before certain revelations that certain FBI officials involved in the interview were themselves being investigated for misconduct. Is it your contention that any misconduct by any member of the FBI raises any degree of doubt that Mr. Flynn intentionally lied to the FBI? Kellner, the defense attorney, "No, Your Honor." The references that I've mentioned that appear in your sentencing memorandum raise some concerns on the part of the court. And my question is, how is raising those contentions about the circumstances under which Mr. Flynn lied consistent with his acceptance of responsibility? Later on in the proceedings, this is where Flynn's lawyer essentially decides to take responsibility for that himself and basically apologize to the court for having raised it. The judge says, quote, the defense lawyer says to the judge, quote, "Let me make very clear, Your Honor, that the decisions regarding how to frame General Flynn's sentencing memorandum made by counsel, made by me, made by Mr. Anthony, the other defense counsel, those decisions are entirely ours and really should not and do not diminish in any way General Flynn's acceptance of responsibility in this case." And the judge then sort of interrupts and says, "The point is well taken, but you understand why I had to make the inquiry?" Defense lawyer says, "I do." The judge says, "Because I'm thinking this sounds like a backpedaling on the acceptance of responsibility." So that did not work. Mike Flynn and his attorneys today disavow and essentially apologize for ever suggesting to the judge that Flynn wasn't really guilty, that the FBI was somehow the real culprit here. I mean, that alone cancels like half the shows on Fox News tonight. Right? What are you going to talk about? But there's also the part where everybody starts talking about Mike Flynn and treason, and they can't stop saying the word treason over and over again. That's next. And there's actually some news there that may not make the judge very happy in this case. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.